Good evening, everyone. I am Catherine Morrison. I am the Adult Services Manager here at the Scarborough Public Library. And this is the 7th year that the library has partnered with the Camden Conference to host a series of programs leading up to the conference in February that explores the conference's theme. We're grateful that they're continuing to include us in this endeavor and for the financial support they provide each year. Before I introduce tonight's presenter, Lenore Rapkin will share how you can participate virtually in this year's conference in February. In addition to being a member of our library's Board of Trustees, Lenore is a member of the Education Committee for the conference. Lenore, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Catherine. Welcome to everybody. I'm confident that you're in for a really exciting evening with Peter Ralston's wonderful presentation, and I don't plan to keep you waiting too long, but I would like to say a few words to you about the conference. On February 20th and 21st, we will be presenting our 34th annual conference entitled The Geopolitics of the Arctic, a Region in Peril. This year, because of the pandemic, the conference will be live streamed into your home, and tickets for you to participate in this event are now on sale on the conference website, www.camdenconference.org. Also on the website, you'll find a roster of really exciting presenters, beginning with our keynote speaker, Olafur Grissom, the former president of Iceland. He will be followed by speakers who will address many aspects of the Arctic, and all of which speakers are highly respected in their respective fields, and all of whom come from a variety of backgrounds and will bring their unique perspectives to the weekend. And we are so happy to have David Brancaccio, the host of the Marketplace Morning Report, moderating the weekend once again. I hope that many of you will check this out on the website and join us for what should be an excellent weekend. And now Catherine's going to introduce your speaker. Thank you.
Before I do introduce our speaker, I just want to point out that he'll be taking questions through the chat, and then I will relay those questions to him. So don't wait till the end of the program. As he goes along, feel free to write your questions in the chat box. And make sure you write them to everyone so that not everyone repeats the same questions. So chat to everyone. In tonight's kickoff event, Peter Ralston will share photographs and stories from the west coast of Greenland and the Northwest Passage, including his observations of climate change. Peter is a renowned photographer, owner of Ralston Gallery in Rockport, and co-founder of the Island Institute. Born in Chaddsford, Pennsylvania, in 1978, he began photographing the coast of Maine after being drawn especially to the working communities that define the coast's enduring character. Ralston's work has been exhibited in galleries, collections, and museums throughout the United States, and is frequently featured on network television and in books and magazines. In 2003, he was awarded an honorary Doctorate of Laws degree at Colby College for his photography as well as his role as co-founder of the Island Institute in 1983. Peter opened Ralston Gallery in Rockport, Maine in 2011 and sells not only his work, but that of his lifelong friends, Andrew and Jamie Wyeth. He is the author of Sightings, a Maine Coast Odyssey, which the library holds in its collection, and he is currently at work on another book about coastal Maine. More information is available on his website, www.ralstongallery.com. And we're very pleased that Peter has joined us this evening to kick off our Camden Conference series. Please virtually help me welcome Peter to the library.
Catherine, thank you. Thank you very much. So audio's good?
Audio's great.
Okay, great. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. I'm really pleased to share these images, thoughts, and observations with you I feel profoundly, passionately, strongly about what I learned, and I feel, it's really almost a moral obligation to share it. So to set the stage, a quick overview, but first, an upfront plug for two really terrific resources on this evening's subject. They're really required almost reading / viewing. The first is a film, Chasing Ice, a 2012 documentary film by a National Geographic photographer who set out to make comprehensible climate change as quantified by ice. It's an amazing film. I cannot possibly overstate its impact, and I say that having been there. So it's Chasing Ice. It's available on Netflix, and you'll see where we ended up at one point in Greenland, the most dramatic part of that film. The other thing I can't recommend highly enough, you'll find this online as well. Elizabeth Kolbert, Kolbert, wrote in the October 24th, 2016 New Yorker, a great piece. It's called A Song of Ice. And I think if you Google A Song of Ice, Elizabeth Kolbert, I'll be quoting a few passages from that beautifully written, really comprehensive piece. Do read it. So I have an hour to cover a lot of territory. So don't be shy, go for it with the questions, and away we go. This is not a lecture or a presentation, that's not me, about climate change. These are simply observations from a 5-week trip in 2016. I am not an expert on any of this stuff, but I've long been deeply interested in this part of the world, and I remain passionate about what I've seen. And God, I hope I get back up there one of these days. You cannot go where I've been and not get it about climate change. And as an artist, as a storyteller, that's what I feel obliged to do. So here's a friend's boat, Rose Hardy, 189-foot aluminum-hulled, Italian-built yacht, launched in 2006, formerly owned by Rupert Murdoch. So this was not too shabby an operation. For this cruise, there was a crew of 13. There were 2 Canadian father-son team guides who really know that part of the world like I know, coast of Maine, and a legendary ice master and pilot aboard. The original plan was a 2-month exploratory trip. I can't believe this is not advancing here. Hold on, we have a little, there we go, thank goodness. The original plan was a 2-month exploratory cruise from Greenland to Nome, but a very unforeseen situation in the owner's world occurred back in the States. So while we were still in Greenland, day 5 of the trip, the owner and dear friend had to leave us, fly back to the States. They sent the plane up for him, but he insisted that we not return with him. He told the skipper, keep going. You guys make this trip for me. Peter, you be my eyes on this trip. And plans changed considerably. We never got to Nome, although we certainly could have because of the lack of ice. So quickly, I'll give you the overview to start. Private plane out of Rockland. We flew to here, the very southern tip of Greenland, fueled up the plane so the pilots could get back that night, and then flew another 500 miles north to the head of this 120-mile long fjord. The Arctic Circle is like right about here. So when we boarded the boat, we were above the Arctic Circle. We briefly dipped below it, and we ran up the west coast of Greenland into Ilulissat. We'll be spending some time there tonight. And then across Baffin Bay to Pond Inlet, Devon Island, we'll be returning to all this, bumping along Devon Island, the world's largest uninhabited island. We went to Resolute, our second Inuit village. And that's when the decision was basically made. The owner is not going to rejoin us. We're not going through the whole passage. Instead, we're going to spend some time in the heart of the best of the Northwest Passage, this. So what we did was circumnavigate Somerset Island and back to here. So I should have said spoiler alert on all of that. So let's get going. So here we are flying up day one. July 25th was when we, this is July 25th, 2016. We're flying over the very southern tip of Greenland here. And the ice just didn't look healthy from this fairly low altitude. It just looked kind of like sick ice, an observation that was borne out as we got a lot closer. We were fueling up in Qasarasuk, and I apologize, my pronunciation on some of these Icelandic names is, Greenlandic names is terrible. Here was Eric the Red's late 10th century first settlement. We've been told on the plane, before we got on the plane, wear lots of layers. You're going to Greenland. When you get off the plane, you're going to be in Greenland, and it's going to be chilly. It was 70. It was not quite 75 that day. I think it was 72 or 73 when we landed. We were peeling layers off. And Greenland down there is green. I mean, these are, you're going to be seeing a lot of indicators of climate change. But we were really shocked stepping out of the plane, and it was in the 70s, 72 or 73. So while the plane was fueling over on the left, we came across this fjord. We were all very excited. Look, icebergs, our first icebergs, it was a joke. A few days later, I mean, we started seeing real icebergs. So this was a restoration of a chapel built by Eric the Red. It's a small fishing, farming, hence the sheep. They raise a lot of sheep for meat and for the wool. So from the New Yorker piece by Elizabeth Colbert, I quote, and there's a lot of archaeological work has been done here, very researched and explored place. From the New Yorker, quote, as Greenland warms, the record of the Norse settlements, along with any clues that they might yield, is being erased. Back in the old days, these sites were frozen most of the year. When I was visiting South Greenland in the 1980s, I was able to jump down in the trenches guys had left open from the 50s and 60s. And sticking out the sides, you could see hair, feathers, wool, and incredibly well-preserved animal bones. A graduate, end quote. Oh no, still quoting, a graduate student who started working in Greenland in 2005 found at the same sites mostly decomposing mush, permafrost going. So after that first little taste of what was to come, here we are on Rose Hardy coming down this extraordinary fjord. We never once set sail while we were up there. We were enjoined legally by Coast Guards, Navy, and insurance because of the ice danger. We simply could never set sail, so we powered the whole way. So I'm skipping along up the west coast here and cutting right to, we stopped in several little villages along the way. This is Ilulissat, which means icebergs in Greenlandic. It's the third largest city, population now of approximately 4,600. This is where the ice gods dwell. This is where it all started getting really transformative for me. There is fishing. It's generally relatively small scale fishing. If you look back here, you can see a couple of fair-sized boats. They're landing a lot of shrimp. The shrimp population that we once had here in Maine that sustains so many, we haven't had a shrimp fishery here for years. They're killing the shrimp up there. We've lost them here, an indicator. Tourism is now the largest business there. I should go back. All these little boats here, this is how people get around. There are no roads between villages. So they're used for hunting, such as what's left, and getting between the coastal villages. A couple of fishermen, these guys were great. Down the harbor, fishermen, guy baiting a tub trawl. I think he was going for cod. Here's a whole mess of cod. Hard to find cod here anymore. They're gone. Certainly commercially extinct. But fishing is still very much a going thing. So here is probably certainly one of the most poignant, gripping indicators of climate change. As recently as 1995, Ilulissat had more than 8,000 dogs. The Inuit take their dogs really, really seriously. These are not pets, these are working tools. You got to think about outboards and snowmobiles and four-wheelers. These are working animals. So in 1995, there were more than 8,000 dogs in that one town. Now, only about 2,000, another index of global warming. No sea ice, no seals. No seals, no hunt. No hunt, no need for dogs. So I'm quoting from the New Yorker. Dogs no longer seemed worth the seal meat it took to feed them. Many were euthanized. Those which remain are used mostly for sport. The mayor said the last time we had ice we could use was 1997. End quote. The Inuit are shooting their dogs. They cannot feed them commercial dog food. I mean, it costs hundreds of dollars a bag. So they are fed the remains of the hunt, which is mostly seals. An 18th century missionary to Greenland discovered that the native people had no word for bread. So he translated the line from the Lord's Prayer, "Give us this day our daily seal." So they're doing away with their dogs. I mean, it's just unthinkable. So Ilulissat is a World Heritage Site. We'll get to that in a second. Well, we're in it now. So here's the path down to the mouth of the ice fjord, which is a unique geographic feature. It's really quite extraordinary. Here's the harbor. You guys can see my cursor, I think. Here's the harbor I showed you a few minutes ago. And so there's a path from there over to the mouth of the ice fjord. What happened is 6,000 years ago, a glacier then stopped here and left a giant moraine, which is basically an enormous, enormous gravel bar at the mouth of this long fjord. And I hope you can see these dates that I'm going to detail here in a second are the face of the glacier in certain years. So here's where the glacier was in 6000 BC at the mouth of the fjord. In 1850, it was here. I'm going to keep jumping. 1902, it was here. 1929, 1942, 1964. Fasten your seatbelts. 2001, it was here. Spring of 2003, it was here. Summer of 2003, it was here. summer 2004, 2006, 2012, and today it's up here. In the past 15 years, the Jakobshavn Glacier has retreated more than it did in the previous century. Since the 1990s, the glacier has nearly tripled its pace. It now advances at something like 6 feet an hour. That's the annual average. It's the fastest moving glacier in the Northern Hemisphere. It's advancing at 6 feet an hour, annual average, even as it's melting back rapidly. Just in the past 4 years, more than 1 trillion tons of ice have been lost. This is 400 million Olympic swimming pools worth of water, or enough to fill a single pool the size of New York State to a depth of 23 feet. The very largest icebergs here, which weigh upward of 100 million tons, can hang around for years before floating free, trapped as in a traffic jam by the ancient submerged moraine or gravel bar that I showed you. So here we are. Oops, sorry. So that next shot is right here at the mouth of the ice fjord. And these are these gigantic icebergs that are hung up there. You saw Rose Hardy. She's a 189-foot boat with 200-foot mass. If we had been out of our minds, I mean, really crazy, and come that close to give you some idea of scale, Rose Hardy would have taken up like that much space right there, and her mass probably wouldn't have even cleared the iceberg. This is one of your 100 million ton icebergs. They are, it's almost incomprehensible how big they are. So some ice. So before we get to the more ice shots, we chartered this helicopter, flew up to see another glacier north a ways, and flying back, we were able to look, here we're looking east, you know, and what is it, 600 miles to the eastern shore of Greenland, with ice 1.5 miles, in some cases, they think as much as 2 miles thick, deep, but it all looks sick. It's all melting so fast. It just doesn't. As New Englanders, we know what ice and snow looks like, say in March and April, if there's any left. That's what it all looks like. That's the Greenland Ice Cap right there. And it goes for 600 miles east, and it looks like this. So here we've landed, and behind us, at this point, it was 6 miles away from where these scientific observation igloos, if you will, very high-tech igloos. It's 6 miles to the face of the glacier, the calving face of the glacier. This was 2016. It's now 8.5 miles, probably even more. It's melted back that much. And if you look, it's a lot of these photographs, it's really, really hard to get a sense of scale, but it's impossible to convey how big this is. It is from here, this very spot, that the most dramatic sequence in that film I mentioned, Chasing Ice, was filmed. And briefly, to wet your whistle for it, you really got to see it. There were 2 guys, young photographers, working on the project, and they were on the phone to the head guy running the whole thing. And they had their cameras, these high definition video cameras, and they had sound and so forth, filming the face of the glacier. And they were saying not much was going on. It's cold, it's windy. And all of a sudden, it started calving, and really calving. And they captured on film, you will see it in Chasing Ice, a chunk of ice the size of Manhattan peeling off, and they got it all on tape. And the sound is extraordinary. I mean, what you see is just, you can't believe what you're seeing. And I've seen it 8 times, and it's still, my jaw still drops. It was the size of Manhattan, and yet it was 3 times taller than the tallest buildings in Manhattan from this spot. So here we are doing our best to look very touristy. Great place. Where we were sort of playing on the side of the glacier there, that's gone now. That's all gone. I'm going to quote a little bit. So remember, as this is calving off here, these gigantic, these are icebergs now. They're in water here. This is the face where it calves, and it takes them sometimes years to get to the mouth of the fjord where those big ones were that I showed you. And that's what these are. These all came off the face of that glacier. So they've had years to melt and whatnot. And they're still, 100 million ton icebergs, some of them. So I'm reading from Elizabeth Colbert's beautiful description of this exact spot. She saw some of the exact same icebergs we were looking at. Quote, towers of ice leaned against arches of ice, which pressed into palaces of ice. Some of the icebergs had smaller icebergs perched on top of them, like minarets. There were ice pyramids and what looked to me like an ice cathedral. The city of ice stretched on for miles. It was all a dazzling white, except for pools of meltwater, that fantastic shade of popsicle blue. Nothing moved, and apart from the droning of the mosquitoes, the only sound was the patter of water running off the bergs. Here are 2 waterfalls coming off one of the icebergs. So, end quote. So even though this particular ice drainage is smaller than the one in Greenland's northeast, there's enough ice just in this one drainage basin of Greenland to raise global sea levels by 2 feet. First time I ever smelled a whale's breath. This was about 10 o'clock at night. We were out, the owner of the boat, dear friend, 2 of the crew and I were out just sort of bombing around in a Zodiac. And these were humpbacks feeding, just lolling around at the surface. It's really hard to get a sense of scale. But they're big. This was at exactly midnight. I think and that's a humpback going under. Way in the background is Disco Island, it being Disco Bay. So here we are leaving Greenland. That's Disco Island again. Miles away, you can see the ice cap on Disco with a glacier running down here. What's left of a glacier over there. This one's melted way back. So a couple shots of this, ridiculously wonderful, opulent boat. It was really quite surrealistic to be up there in the high north in this kind of luxury. It was surreal at times. We did not suffer. There were 500 bottles of really good wine aboard. The crew was amazing. The food was extraordinary. My wife was a little miffed, thinking this is the hot tub, thinking that we were going to be up there, and hot tubbing it as we went along. Somehow that just seemed not right. And but the hot tub was converted into the sort of down cellar, and everywhere we went there was ice, of course. So we kept cooling things. This is my anyway, one crew, the owner, a couple friends. So now we're steaming across Baffin Bay for the high Canadian Arctic, the entrance to the Northwest Passage. And I hope you can see here. I think on your screens, this image is small. Here's where we were in Ilulissat. Here's west coast of Greenland. Here's where we've just been. There's Disco Island. We're headed over here. This is Baffin Island, Baffin Bay. What this depicts is the sea ice, not icebergs or anything. This is sea ice on the 25th of July, 2016. Here's where the sea ice was by the 18th of August. Oh, shoot. Hold on. There. That's how fast it was going that year. I will note that I just saw 3 days ago, that this past year, 2020, how appropriate given this crazy year we've all just had, has beaten 2016 as the hottest year on record. So because the sea ice was gone, we were clearly able to get through to Alaska. Those of us that spend a lot of time on the water and boats and whatnot, something like this on a chart gets your attention. We were close enough to the magnetic North Pole that magnetic compasses were truly useless. We had a lot of electronics, I mean, in spades electronics, but I'd never seen that on a chart before. So here's we've 2.5 days across Baffin Bay. Here's our first sight of the northern end of Baffin Island. At this point, we're something like 400 miles above the Arctic Circle, maybe a little bit more than that. And the first thing we see are 2 hanging glaciers. Hanging glaciers are those that once made it to the sea, but are melting and melting fast back. They are melting back from the sea, they're becoming the sea. If you look closely down here, you can see part of the moraine. There's more moraine there, just gravel. This is dropping as it melts back. Here's a larger moraine over here for this one. Sick ice, dying ice. So our first Inuit village was Pond Inlet. In the background there is Bylot, B-Y-L-O-T Island, which apparently has the highest polar bear density on the planet, and sure enough, first minute ashore, I went for a walk. Everybody else was going up to the, sort of the tourist center, such as it was. There's a little visitation place. I just went for a walk with my camera, and this is the first thing I saw. Some guy had gotten a bear, and it was drying on his hunting sled. There's Bylot behind. This is one of only 2 pet dogs we saw the whole time in the Inuit villages. People just cannot afford pet food. I mean, it's unthinkable. And with it's a great luxury to have a pet. So this is all Pond Inlet. The older part of the Inuit cemetery. There's no wood there, of course. We are 1,000 miles above the tree line, so wood is a premium commodity. But these were wooden headstones which connoted some significance of the people buried there. And you get a little look at Pond Inlet back there behind the Arctic poppies. It felt very much like an American Indian reservation. And we don't have time tonight for me to get into the whole history of, I'll speak a little bit about it a little bit later, but these are tough places to live. Tough places. So we're moving on now from Pond Inlet. We're going to explore a little bit of Baffin Island and then head further north. This is at midnight, a double midnight sun. Made me feel like home because there was a little fog, which felt like Maine. So I spoke earlier about the sense of scale. It's so hard to convey scale. We're running up Milne Inlet here, and we knew that it was the narwhal whale hunting season. The village was allowed to, I think, a couple of dozen whales was their limit. So the guys were out hunting whales. We had a polar bear swimming in the water, which was our first bear sighting right here. And we heard rifle fire, which is how they get the whales. And then they harpoon them so they can't sink. It was sort of an extraordinary scene we found ourselves in. Back to the scale, I mean, it's really hard to imagine how big this is until I'm going to hopefully, I'm afraid to zoom in on this. I don't want to lose the screen. But if you look down here, it's probably a 24-foot, 22, 24-foot aluminum boat, 3 guys in it. That's it. They're out whale hunting. And that gives you some idea of how big this is. A little bit further up Milne Inlet are these famous spires, which are like 2,000 feet out of the water, and there's still higher land behind them. And yet on our fathometer, we had, I forget what it was, but really deep water under us. The scale is enormous, very hard to sense the scale. So here we are now at the very northern tip of Baffin Island, close to Pond Inlet, about to head further north. What's significant here is this is the only place in the world where there were 7 glaciers that came down and met salt water. It's a remarkable geographic spot. The Canadian government had a stamp, commissioned an artist to do a painting of this spot. I forget the name of this. But there were 7 glaciers that came down to the sea. Now only 1 here is touching, and I suspect by now that has melted back. They too have melted into the sea and become the sea. This is where sea level rise is all coming from. So that's gone now. So we've gone north. You'll recall when I showed you the chart early on, Devon Island is the largest uninhabited island on the planet. It's really an amazing place. Now we're almost 100, no, what am I saying? We're almost 500 miles north of the Arctic Circle. We're in Dundas Harbor, and I'm going to try to, it's so difficult for me to abbreviate. I will try to go quickly through one day in Dundas Harbor. Amazing place. And by the way, note the color, we'll come back to this, but note the color of the rocks back here. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So this is all one day now in Dundas Harbor. Right after this berg rolled, which was pretty dramatic, but this was the scene at breakfast. And remember this little cairn here, we'll come back to that. So a few of us jumped into Zodiac and went up to the head of this so-called harbor. And there's a glacier up there. And while there, we were struck again by just the immensity, the enormity of it all. There's another third, at least, of what you're seeing here, at least another third up above what's on your screen to give you some sense, beginning sense of scale. This little black dot down here is an adult muskox, kind of trucking along. So we went back to the boat. I always hated going back to the boat. I just wanted to stay out there. And we had lunch, and then we came back, and I wanted to track the muskox. So we started doing that. This is Arctic cotton growing in the foreground. And here is some muskox droppings, these gorgeous little flowers. So I'm on my hands and knees, doing my Peter, artist, sensitive thing, photographing the flowers and these delicate, gorgeous little things growing in, the harshest environment on the planet next to, other than a volcanic slope. Absolutely gorgeous. And then unbelievable, there's a bumblebee, a bumblebee, 500 miles above the Arctic Circle. Are you kidding me? I subsequently, so here's a vivid indicator of climate change. After I got back, there was an article in the Times, New York Times, about a scientist at the University of California leading the Bombus polaris, which is the scientific name for the Arctic bumblebee project, tracking to see how far north they're going. The expansion of their range, of course, is a direct indicator of climate change. There are so many ways to measure and quantify and comprehend how fast things are changing. This particular scientist was focusing on the expansion of the range of these guys. Anyway, I got hold of her, I found her email and sent her this photograph. And I had data from the ship's log, time of day, the lat long, the whole 9 yards. She was very grateful. This was actually very useful information, knowing that they have come this far north. She had a great sense of humor. She's quite a character. She reported that she wanted me to know that this was a male Bombus polaris because, as she said, as in so many other species, the males are always scruffier. So this is all one day in Bombus Harbor. So now we're up at that cairn that I showed you a few minutes ago, looking sort of outside of the harbor, if you will, itself. And this is an old Royal Canadian Mounted Police station. It did not last long. I'm sort of, anyway, it was short-lived. There was a tragedy there. The only 2 Mounties died and so forth. Anyway, we were sort of checking it out. I was inside. Bears had broken in, and just sort of seeing inside this place, my God, it was hard to imagine people living there, no communications through polar winter, Arctic winter, madness. And there was madness. One of the Mounties shot the other and then committed suicide. They're buried on the hill up above here. Anyway, a very powerful place to be. So I'm in there and I hear polar bear. It's a polar bear. So ran outside, and sure enough, onto the beach where we're all standing, there was a small shore party of us. Here comes what was actually a very large bear swimming ashore. And here we are watching this. You will note certain things here. You will note the dropped jaw over here, the guy in the orange jacket. And you will notice the gun one of our 2 guides is carrying. We'll talk a little bit more about bears later, but bears are starving there. And that's due to the ice loss and no seals. Anyway, the guide, Matt, the guide got a little twitchy. This was a big one. Had obviously not eaten in a while. Of the 13 bears we saw, 12 were clearly gaunt. We didn't see any starving to death, like staggering at starvation, but of the 13, 12 were really visibly gaunt. So he chased it, we all had to go back to the boat. Well, I started negotiating, begging, wheedling, conniving, and they let me go back out on the Zodiac. Everybody else stayed ashore. I went out on the Zodiac with a couple of the crew. I wanted to get more pictures of the bear. So there it is. And then it was probably certainly the stupidest thing during the trip. Got them to agree, well, let's go ashore. It's lying down. It's like taking a nap. We can sort of keep our distance, but let's get ashore and see if we can get a little closer. There are so many of us, it's not going to charge. So here's a picture of it from quite a distance. It was about 100 yards. And there it is again. At first it rose up when it saw us, settled right back down. Like I say, we're about 100 yards away. Between us and the bear was a pond. And I sort of skipped one vital part in this. As we were climbing from the Zodiac up this bluff, we hit a flat area on the rocks, and there were all these old Inuit tent rings. Impossible to date them, but it was the site of a pretty major Inuit, if not settlement, hunting camp. And so we had passed through that. Here's this pond, there's the bear. The guide's getting a little twitchy. He says, Peter, you cannot go further, 1 inch further, that's it. And as I was at the edge of the pond, I looked down and saw this thing in the water. I'm gonna go through this quickly. Turns out, the long and short of it, none of us knew what this was. In my mind, it was clearly a jawbone. Matt would not let me take it back to the boat. Someday I want to go back and get this thing. It's just so amazing. I knew it was a jawbone. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody on the boat looking at it knew what it was. We were absolutely baffled. Nobody knew. We had connectivity, believe it or not, from the boat, internet. So I got hold of a dear friend, Donnie Perkins, who is the founder of Gulf of Maine Research Institute in Portland, and asked him if he could help me, told him where I was. Guess where I'm calling from, Donnie. Can anybody identify this? And word came back. I would ask you all, can anybody guess? But since we can't do that, Zooming, I'll tell you, it is the lower jaw of a leatherback turtle, world's largest turtle, a warm water animal. So we figured out what it was. The next question obviously was, how in God's name did this thing get there? How could this possibly have been there? We were really stumped. And then our ice master, who was 82 years old, who was taking a nap, he came up, looked at us like we were idiots and said, well, the whalers, of course. And that was it. 18th and 19th century sailors would catch the slow moving surface, swimming turtles. They were very easily caught. They would put them in the holds of the whaling ships, and they would have a supply of fresh meat with them. That it was easy to keep these big, huge turtles alive. So what we had found was evidence of a 18th, maybe 19th century picnic, a feast between whalers and the Inuit. Anyway, this is all one day in Dundas Harbor. It was one of the most extraordinary days of my life. So I'm going to pick up the pace now. We're headed west, bumping along the bottom of Devon Island. Devon Island. We're in Kroker Bay now. We saw the only 2 seals we saw the entire time, and they were not on sea ice. Kroker is a bifurcated bay, and at the head of each cove, if you will, end of the bay, there were glaciers. So there were a lot of bergy bits, these chunks of, melted icebergs floating around. So here's a ring seal on one and a bearded seal on another. What we didn't know is that as there were 2 of the crew, myself and one of the other guests, sort of bopping around. This shows it best on a Zodiac as the big boat kept going further up into the bay. What we didn't know was inadvertently, we had each of those seals was separately being stalked by a polar bear in the water. And we felt badly that we had broken off the hunt. I wish we were in person. I'd ask all of you, this is this is so unfair. Does anybody see the wolf in this image? There's a wolf in here. And I later shared this with Inuit friends. when we were back on Baffin Island, they thought I was a conjurer. They thought I was a shaman, that I was able to get the two top terrestrial predators, man-aside, in one image. I got the polar bear and the wolf in one shot. And it's sort of tricky, but they saw it. The shadow from the polar bear's head is absolutely the shadow of, is shaped like a wolf head. They thought I was, that I had powers. Anyway, this bear, thin, no stomach, nothing. And same with this one. This is the other bear that had broken off a hunt on the, this guy was much bigger, going after the bearded seal, really clearly starving. Walrus, again, this is all still Devon Island. This is the only bear we saw that had clearly eaten in a while. You know, if you eat a seal, it shows. And this one actually lay down and sort of is not roaring at us, it's yawning, and it was, you know, just decided to lie down. It was so warm, it wanted to be on the snow to take a nap. So rehashing, we left Greenland, steamed across to Pond Inlet. Here's Bylot Island, high polar bear density. We went up the Milne Inlet there. The 7 glaciers were here. We steamed across to Dundas Harbor. Here's Devon Island. There's Dundas Harbor in there. There's Kroker with the bifurcated bay with the 2 glaciers. We're headed toward Resolute. So that's where we're going next. Oh, sorry. Right here, you can't really see it, is Beechy Island, B-E-E-C-H-Y. Beechy Island is a historic site, almost a revered, it's a holy site in the high Canadian Arctic. It was here that the first of John Franklin's men died in 1845. Franklin left England with 2 ships, Erebus and Terror, 129 men, state-of-the-art technology. They had steam engines. They were burning coal in addition to sail. They had canned food, which was unheard of. I mean, it was a brand new technology. This was sort of their moonshot, and they disappeared. Subsequent explorations to find them, searched, and there were scores, literally, of explorations, rescue operations, and so forth to find Franklin. So here we are in this opulent boat, and there we can see ashore the Franklin graves. It is here that the first of Franklin's men died. 3 of them died, and then subsequently 2 people died looking for Franklin. So there are these graves. This is, as I say, something of a, it's a very powerful site up there. Two years before we were up there, I think it was 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. No, 2 years before we were there, the first of Franklin's ships had been found. I'll show you the next time we're on the chart where they had found them, but way south of here. And it was only September 3rd, a week or so after we were here, that way, again, well south of here, they finally found Franklin's second ship. It took them 170 years to find both the ships. All 129 men died. They were reduced to cannibalism. It was a absolutely ghastly, it was a huge loss for exploration, for Britain, for all of it. There are some really absolutely fascinating books written about all this. A great one, and obviously the library either has or has access to many of these. A great one is Finding Franklin, which tells the story of the Franklin expedition and all the efforts to find him. There was this house built there. You can see coal was left there. And here are the remnants of canned food in the shape of a cross. This was a very powerful place. I mean, European heads of state have visited here. Big mojo here. Oh, so good. Here's a chart. So Beechy Island is here. And what turned out was that Franklin's men, wanted to find the Northwest Passage. That's why they were there. They came down this side of Somerset Island. This is Somerset. And this is when they really started losing it and abandoned their ships. Down in here, they started abandoning ships. Some men went ashore, some didn't. Others were going ashore here. They found many human bones that had obviously been eaten, signs of flesh removal and so forth. They finally found the first of Franklin's ships here, and they found the second one here. So what we're doing now is we're leaving here, we're going over to Resolute, our second village or hamlet. It is a logistically vital, important spot in the far north. There's an airstrip there. And when I first heard what I'm about to tell you, no way, not possible. But really and truly, they land 737s on gravel strips up there. And this is the Inuit village. The Inuits keep, and the white exploration, military, aviation, and so forth community is separate. You can see they write in white rocks on all the hills in the villages. There's Resolute right there. So we were here to reprovision. We were here to get fuel. I think we'll see that in a second. I ran across this family. Shell Ann on the right is the wife of the senior Royal Canadian Mounted Police constable. She had these 3 kids. The 2 on the right were just irrepressible. They were great. They never once stopped smiling. The one on the left would not make eye contact. He was very funny. I just love these kids, had a great time. They invited me up to the house. I saw lots of fossils that the kids had found and so forth. They actually invited me to go 4-wheeling with them. But we had to leave rather quickly. We'll get back to that. So leaving their house, I'm walking down the hill, and there's this dog over on the left barking at me, sort of strange smell. And I see these bear skulls. So I go over to have a look at them, kind of, not too close or anything. And the guy comes out of the house, he waves me on over. He couldn't have been more friendly. And we got to talk. There's so much of the details I'm leaving out here, but I was impressed by these skulls. As Americans, we cannot bring any parts whatsoever of marine mammals. Bears are considered marine mammals there. They're in the water so much, back into the States. But the Inuit sell bear skins, heads, paws, skulls, whatnot. It's one of the ways they supplement their income. This is not a bad thing they're doing. They're very careful about the resource. They're very respectful. These are powerful spiritual animals to them, but they also harvest them. So I'm talking to the guy and I said, well, geez, that one. So this is like the business end of the bear, the last thing a lot of seals see or used to see. I said, well, that's a big one on the left. He goes, you want to see a big one? So you see this pot in the background. I quickly found out what the odd smell was. Oh, he was cooking polar bear heads in his backyard. And that's something you don't see every day. Anyway, great guy, very interesting guy. We had very interesting political discussions. Great guy. We don't have time tonight for me to go into any real explanation or discussion about the Inuit other than to say that that Canada, as did the United States, upon its native people, perpetrated real atrocities on the Inuit to establish dominion. And this is about this goes to the heart of what the Camden Conference theme is this year, the geopolitics of the Arctic. Well, the geopolitical bit here, and I got to do this really quickly, is that for Canada to establish its dominion and domain over the high Canadian North in the eyes of the World Court, they had to have Canadians living up there. So they got Inuit from much further south, Hudson's Bay and stuff like that, even south of the Arctic Circle, to move up here with promises of incredible herds of caribou, incredible fishing. It's actually milder up there. We'll build you great houses. All lies. Many, many families starved to death. It was a terrible thing. Canada did, establish domain and dominion in the World Court, but it was at a terrible cost to the people. Anyway, here's an Arctic willow, the only tree-like thing up there. Here's a very old Arctic willow. Right here is the main trunk, which came all of about 2.5, 3 inches above out of the ground. That's an old tree there. So I think, now we've moved on from Resolute. We've moved on from Resolute. We fueled up, and we're the decision's been made. We're not going to Alaska, although there was no ice, and we certainly could have done it. We're going to circumnavigate Somerset. We're still hoping that maybe the owner would fly back up and join us. Here's an immature bearded seal. I can guarantee you had never seen anything like Rose Hardy swimming in close to the boat. There she is. So we're getting a little bit of sea ice here. This is not glacial ice. This is sea ice. And a few of us went ashore char fishing for the fabled, the great, and the extremely delicious Arctic trout. And on the radio, they called us back. They said, the ice maps are changing. The wind is going to change rapidly. Get back here. We got to get out of here now. So back to the boat we headed. And I'm pretty sure that image was in here. We were in this bay. Now, I don't have time to even begin to explain the intricacies, but this is the real deal Canadian ice charts. This is what you pay attention to. And we're here, and we need to get down to here. And it showed that there was ice building in here. Blue means there's a little tiny bit of ice. You might see some, but this gets more serious. So we set out at once to get through it. And again, we're going to go from here down through here. So this put Captain Patrick Toomey, the world's expert. I mean, he is the guy on ice. He spent his life, he was a British citizen. He gave that up, became a Canadian citizen because the Brits don't have icebreakers. And all his life he ran icebreakers. He studied ice. His whole life was ice. There's a strait in Antarctica named after him. So knowing that there's ice around, he was in his glory. Pat comes up and he's on the bridge and it's full alert. We had a 0 ice contact policy. Rose Hardy being a very thin-skinned aluminum boat that really had no business being up there. None. This is the kind of boat that's built for the Mediterranean, the Caribbean. All this superstructure, this is the fly bridge up top. All this was especially installed so we could be up top and have better view of what was ahead in ice. And there were ice-seeking cameras and all this. So here we are. And this is the only point during which we saw sea ice. And here we are in the heart, I mean the heart of the fabled Northwest Passage, blocked forever. And we're going through it in an aluminum boat. This is the most ice we saw. Sea ice. I'd love to someday look down on this. Well, I've done it, yeah, from 35,000 feet. And you understand, just in passing, I mean, this is as good an image as any, reminding me, this is all polar desert. I had no idea that this bit about it being a polar desert is really for real. Not only are there no trees, but there's very little actual precipitation. I think in Pond Inlet, the average annual precipitation is 7 inches. There's a lot of snow, but you melt it down to water, and it's desert. A lot of places you close your eyes and it's, honest to God, goodness, it's like you're in Monument Valley. So here we are, we're coming down the east side rather of Somerset Island. And our guides, Pete and Matt, knew of this very small embayment where in the, I am so sorry, I forget what year it was, but 3 British whaling ships managed to trap thousands of beluga whales in this very shallow bay. Beluga whales, I mean, who knew? Beluga whales, the population of which today is stable, so you needn't fret. They are the only mammals that abrade their skin, shed their skin. And they do it by swimming in to these really shallow bays, like into 3, 4, 5, 6 feet of water, and rolling over and over, rolling on these very sharp Arctic, almost knife-like stones, and rub their skins off. These 3 whaling ships trapped them in there. It was a windfall for them. I mean, they became millionaires. They trapped them, and they were able to harvest, I don't know, I forget what the number is, but it's, just as far as you can see, it's just whale bones. The beluga whales had the most valuable, the premium whale oil of the time. So they did very, very well. But it's just whale bones all over. It's an eerie, amazing, haunting place, a killing field. So anyway, speaking of hunting, friends of our guides in Resolute said we could enjoy and visit their hunting camp. And they said there's great fishing there and there's some cool stuff there. So this is a pretty well-established Inuit hunting camp. It has a big, nice beach where they can land planes. These guys, planes are how people get around part of the year. The oil cans, the 50-gallon cans drums are sort of ubiquitous. Some call them the flowers of the north. So we were char fishing, and again, it's all so big and beautiful. So we got some more fish, topped off on that. It was very interesting. I visited an Inuit dump on an island offshore there, where the Inuit clean all their catch. You don't clean your catch in the camp because that's, bears will come like flies to honey. And I got a great caribou rack that I was allowed to bring back into the States. It's here in the gallery. And so we've set off again. Patrick Toomey doing his thing, looking for ice. This is at midnight. We're trying to get ahead of the ice, which we did. And you'll see where the green was over here. It's all about the wind and where the wind's pushing the ice. So, north westerly winds are pushing it over here. And we've now got a clean shot around here. This is all Baffin Island over here. So we're headed down this way to Fort Ross and Bellot Strait. So Fort Ross was a Hudson's Bay company. This was the trading post. And this is where the men lived. And this was the last one they established in the high north in 1929. It only lasted a few years. It was not sustainable. There weren't enough trappers. And anyway, they didn't make much of a go of it. This is where they lived. This is not my son's college dorm room. This is what happens when bears get into a place. But you can see, I mean, look at the, they had built-in bookshelves, and, they had, rather elegant wallpaper and all this. It was Rule Britannia there long ago. So we knew this was going to happen because, we were in touch on the boat, the ship's radios and so forth. So here's a container ship going by. And here is a former Russian spy ship. They have a lot of, I guess there are like 14 or so of these that they have converted, these old spy ships, sort of a mothballed fleet, but a number of them have been converted into sort of polar and ecological or environmental tour ships. One Ocean is the name of the company that chartered this from them. And it was something of a shock to see people. We had previously had the place all to ourselves. And I'll get to why this place, why this is a nexus place, but there she is. And all of a sudden there were all these people. And I guess we'd gotten pretty full of ourselves thinking we owned it all being up there, but we hadn't seen anybody except for the Inuit, the 2 Inuit villages. This is why those 2 ships were here. Because as I showed you on the chart, when I said we were headed to the, this little cut at the southern end of Somerset Island, this is one of the extreme geographic points on the planet. This is Bellot Strait, and it's fabled in the north. There's a big tide runs through there. Ice can come through there, including the old ice, the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 year old ice that's been compressed, that's absolutely clear, that's as hard as a diamond, that could open that boat up like butter. That's what sank the Titanic, not a huge towering iceberg. They hit old ice, by the way. Anyway, so we're on full watch going through this pretty risky passage. The first European boat through there, it was like right around 1929. I mean, it's an extraordinary place. So as we're going through, all hands on watch, full alert, everybody. Right here, it's actually, this one is further north than that one. This is the very northern tip of continental North America. There is no point further. It's called Point Zenith, and North America ends in a gravel bar, basically. Everything off to starboard were islands in the archipelago, the Arctic, Canadian Arctic archipelago. But this is the very northern tip of North America. And there's another view of it as we're passing it. Everything south of this, to the tip of South America, or as far north as it gets. Amazing place. So here now we've rounded that. I'm really accelerating. We're rounding the very top of Somerset Island here. Actually, this is King William Island. No, I forget the name of this one. But we arrive in Arctic Bay, which of the, this is Baffin Island, northwestern Baffin Island. Absolutely hands down my favorite of the Inuit hamlets that we visited. Population about 900. I felt so at home here. With the Island Institute, 30 years of my life is working in remote, really remote communities. And I felt so at home here. People were wonderful. It's beautiful, desolate, remote, my God. The Inuit name, which is unpronounceable to me, they call this the Pocket. It's this huge harbor. It's too big to be completely safe, but it breaks some of the sea coming in here. Of course, it freezes in the winter. But that's pretty much the whole village. Here's the fuel depot over there. There's an airstrip behind over here. And man, I just loved it there. people were, I just felt so at home, pretty laid back. 2016, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but we were the only yacht in there that summer. And there was only one small cruise ship in there that summer. I mean, this is really off the beaten track, if you will. There's the school. And the four-wheelers are really ubiquitous. Everybody's got them. Not too many trucks. The only trucks are used, are to bring water to the houses and to take sewage away is pretty much it with the, of course, I'm a liar now. There are 2 pickup trucks down there. Most people had four-wheelers. So I'm up at the school. I look down, I see this guy's got a net, a gill net strung off the beach. So I figured, well, he's getting char, these big Arctic trout, delicious Arctic trout. So, and there are kids down there and there's a puppy bouncing around. I thought, well, I got to go down and check this out. So down I go. And it's such a great scene going on. The puppy's in hog heaven. I mean, it's eating all the scraps it could possibly stuff into it. But the extraordinary thing, and here comes a major indicator of climate change, is they weren't just getting char. That's a char there. And he's working on char there. They were also getting salmon, Atlantic salmon, where there have never, ever been Atlantic salmon before. Not in archaeological digs where they, see what people have lived on over the centuries. This is the intrusion of a species that has not ever been there before. This is climate change. This is a stone, hardcore indicator of climate change. When I got home, and I think it was in Elizabeth Colbert's piece somewhere, oh yeah, it was in the New Yorker piece, saying that the Inuit of northern Baffin Island were alleging that they were finding Atlantic salmon, an intrusive species, for the first time. Well, allege this, this is a big deal. They actually had a research vessel in there while we were there, taking samples and so forth. This is actually another indicator of climate change. This guy's name was Jaco. I was walking in the village back behind there. He came along in his four-wheeler and offered to sell me a narwhal tusk. And I said, well, I can't. The boat is flagged, British Commonwealth, but we're Americans and we're going back into customs. We got to clear customs in America. I can't do anything. But he persisted. He was the nicest guy. He took me a ride on his four-wheeler and we rode around town a little bit. And he did, you'll see a picture of what these things look like. He did sell me, and I admit, I broke the law here. He sold me the inner tusk of a narwhal. I never knew that they had an inner tusk. There's the big, long, quote, unicorn horn that comes out of them, but inside, often not breaking their forehead, the skin, the blubber of, they have these small inner tusks. So he sold me one. And we really hit it off. So he said, I want to give you a present. So the tusk cost me, I think it was $20. Took me back to his house and he says, I want you to have muktuk. And he goes, he wouldn't let me pay for it. It was a gift. And I'd been warned about muktuk, more about that in a second. He goes in to his house and gets the frozen muktuk out of a freezer. The Inuit no longer can bury what they need to keep frozen in the permafrost because the permafrost is going that fast. So yeah, you can sell refrigerators, you can sell freezers. Houses are tilting over. Big projects straightening up houses as they are sinking into the permafrost. Anyway, parenthetically, I did try the muktuk. I had been warned that it's an honor to be given muktuk by the people. Our guides warned us, it is truly, you will not be able to eat it. But I was very grateful to him, took it back to the boat, and we all tried to eat it. Nobody could get it down except the elder of the two guides. But it was really a sweet thing. absolutely a sign of climate change. So this is like going to Hannaford or Shaw's, exactly the same deal. This is the parking lot. Everything is extraordinarily expensive. It either comes in by plane or by supply ship. I mean, it's just crazy what things cost. Kids were beautiful. Whole time I was there, I never saw a single glowing screen, iPhone, iPad, none of it. I saw a lot of this. These are young men who traditionally become hunters, playing with boats in the water, learning how to read water, even in this little simple way. I talked to a few of these guys, the older guys, and this is how it starts. The kids love this, of course, because this thing would really scream. So they were quite taken. They'd never seen one quite like this. They love that. Here's a hunting canoe, these big, long, beautiful, beautiful canoes. There again, they're fast. You can see a few, certainly more contemporary modern boats, fiberglass and aluminum back there as well. We knew this guy was coming. It was this is actually smaller, it looks bigger because of the lens, but this is actually fewer passengers than the Russian conversion boat. And we knew they were coming. Arctic Bay is renowned for their arts, the carvings, the paintings, and other artistic endeavors. So we had all sort of stocked up knowing these guys were coming. And it's how they're making a living. As things change, these people are truly the masters of survival. Look where they live, my God, and have for centuries upon centuries. And as it's all changing, thanks to natural cycles, but we all know perfectly well that climate change is seriously accelerated by what we as a race are doing to the climate, to the planet. They have to adapt. And these are masters of adaptation. So yes, there are those, I've had people say, well, isn't it just awful that these are turning into touristy places? This is keeping these guys going, a lot of it. And we'll talk about the real big money. This is not the big money. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Peter, this is Catherine breaking in.
Hi.
This is perhaps what you're talking about now. Larry's asking, how do they sustain themselves? So fishing, and maybe you're about to go on to some other ways that they're
So that's a great question.
eking out a living.
Yep, that's a great question. And it's funny, it's right about now I always seem to get that question. This, by the way, is little Oscar. Let's go back a second. So tourism is going to do nothing but increase there. And they will, just as we do on the coast of Maine. I mean, look what happens here in the summer. There are a lot of, and as fisheries diminish here, we've lost so much in the way of fisheries and resource-based income producing, traditions on the coast. There's more and more people make money off the summer people and so forth and so on. Well, they're going to do that. But the big money is the trillions. It is the enhanced accessibility that you can go across the top of the world now, that you can get ships in there. You can get ships in there to go from the Pacific to the Atlantic faster, from Asia to Europe, 40% shorter, faster, and 40% less expensive to go over the top of the world than to go down through the canal. So there's the whole shipping bit, but where the big money is, and who knows how this is going to play out. But the trillions of dollars worth of oil, gas, and minerals, precious metals. And I mean, I'll show you in a bit where, we visited the site of a big future aluminum plant. So there's, things are changing. It's not all going to be pretty. And one hopes, I guess, that the people whose land this is will be able, I mean, they will be able to survive, but it's going to be very different. The old ways are going to go. We're seriously, they're going to go. So I hope that, I'll come back to that in a little bit. It's a
Peter,
great,
I just want to, sorry, I'm just going to break in. We're already at 8 o'clock.
oh God.
So I just want to remind people, if anyone does have a question or a quick comment, to add it into the chat so we don't miss it.
Fire away and I will accelerate.
Okay.
I promise. I told you guys this would probably happen. Here's Oscar trying to sell me a second little inner narwhal tusk. Willie, wonderful guy, with the real narwhal tusk that the Canadian tourists can buy. They sell them for a fortune. So remember I was talking back, this is, oh God, Victory Bay. And I had been told by Shell Ann, back in Resolute, the wife of the Mountie there, that if anybody on the boat, if you do get to Arctic Bay, there's a golf course. And I don't play golf at all. The captain, the second captain and the second engineer both did. So I put together this little expedition to go over and play golf with some of these guys. But before we go there, again, look at the color of the land here. This is all so rich in minerals. So this is Victory Bay. Shell-Ann had warned us that when you go there, be aware that this is where they stage all their winter hunting. You see all the snowmobiles and sleds lined up there. And this is where they take all the catch. They don't bring it back into Arctic Bay. They bring it to Victory Bay because cleaning the catch brings the bears big time. So again, look at, I mean, it's just all minerals. I mean, you just see the wealth almost. There's a big aluminum plant being built around the corner from here. Big. So they're waiting for the ice to come in. So sure enough, there's actually a golf course there. This was a once in a lifetime event for me. We were playing at night. This is about 9 o'clock at night. This is our second captain teeing off. Here's our second engineer. And I didn't play golf. I was busy with the camera having a ball. It was chilly. Everybody's got jackets on. It was spitting a little bit of snow. And we're playing golf. And they have their own unique sets of rules. There's a high tide game and a low tide game, about finding balls. This is not the rough. This is the fairway. This is the rough down here and this is the rough up here. So you play 4 holes that way, and then 5 holes one way, and then you play them coming back. You reverse yourself. And so I was looking at Dominic's, I noticed Dominic put his bag down. I thought, geez, Dominic, what kind of club is that? And he was the one charged with carrying a heavy gun the whole way around because the bears are there often. We saw bear tracks everywhere. And there's a rule, it's sort of, course rules. If anybody sees a seal, walrus, whale, whatever that's worth getting, they will drop what they're doing and they are after it in a heartbeat. So here's part of what was a whale at one point, not sure what kind, bear tracks all over. Here's Ian, our second captain, trying to get to the hole, which is a hole in the, there was actually sand there, a piece of rebar with some construction webbing on it and a can sunk in the sand. This great little kid. And there we all are. Great bunch of guys. I'm friends with this guy. He's the senior hunter in the village, Tom, amazing guy. And it was an experience I'll never forget. So there's one image left after this, and I'm gonna quickly read some stuff. 2016 was the hottest year on record, 3rd year in a row that this record had been set. The record has been broken twice since then. As I say, 2020 beat the record again. In 2016, remember that? In over 6 years, 6 hours of combined presidential debate, there was not one single question asked ever about climate change. I'm going to try very hard not to get political here. Our outgoing president has been a disaster for, among other things, addressing climate change. I am now immensely heartened by our president-elect who believes in science and strategic responsibility. There's a spiral of silence around climate change. Real polls, not fake news, reveal that 2 in 3 Americans are moderately or very interested in global warming. Yet, the same polls indicate that 7 in 10 Americans rarely or never even discuss warming with family and friends. So it's like it's on our collective radar, but it's out there. It's not an issue. It doesn't affect me. What can I do? All this stuff. I ask each of you, all of us, to ask ourselves, where do I fit into those statistics? So I'll give you a local morsel to chew on while it lasts anyway, and that would be lobsters, unless you want to substitute shrimp or cod or any of our other iconic but shrinking or commercially extinct populations. Since 2004, the waters of the Gulf of Maine have warmed faster than any other saltwater on the planet, except for a small patch north and east of Japan. Couple this with rapidly increasing acidification due to carbon dioxide, and it's really, no surprise that a lot of our fishermen are finally starting to take this stuff very, very seriously. You just keep watching how many more are converting to aquaculture as a second stream of income, or third, because they know what's coming. Flashback to the Inuit and the lack of ice, seals, dogs, bears, salmon, etc. So I'm not here to play Chicken Little or scientist. We all need to do our own homework and so forth. Someday, I still get emotional doing this. Someday, our grandchildren, my grandchildren, and your grandchildren will be asking, what did you guys do about this mess when you saw it coming? In my humble opinion, not even humble opinion, in my fierce opinion, to remain uninformed or worse, in denial, is shameful. It has never been more appropriate to think globally and act locally. So here's the wind-up. I'm almost done. Thank you, guys. The first time I showed these images, I've been very emotional this last week, so forgive me. Somebody a friend sent me this part of a poem. The poem is Hieroglyphic Stairway. It's a great poem. Find it online. Hieroglyphic Stairway by Drew Dellinger. And it really kind of says it all. And this is just part of it. This is just an excerpt. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protests when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing your beautiful photographs and your story of your journey and your insights into the climate change. We don't have anyone, if anyone has any last minute questions, add them. I don't see any here, but we do have a comment from Pam and Dennis that says, as always, fascinating presentation and wonderful to see you. As sad it is to see and hear about the climate change, we all know it's real. Thanks for sharing your experiences. Love, Pam and Dennis.
I know who they are.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I got a little emotional there.
That's okay. It's understandable.
That one gets me every time. I've lost it almost every time I read that poem. And recent events, have me as concerned as ever, but I am, even as things are really antsy right now, I am very ultimately hopeful by what lies ahead.
Evan shares incredible talk. Wow.
Thanks, Evan.
So I do hope everyone can join us for our second program in this series, which is going to be Wednesday, January 27th at 6:30. It will feature Bowdoin Professor Susan Kaplan, who is director of the Peary McMillan Arctic Museum and Arctic Studies Center, and she'll be discussing links between Maine and the Arctic regions. And then our third program will be Wednesday, February 3rd at 6:30 p.m. And Matt Ward, who is a retired Foreign Service officer who lives here in Scarborough, will discuss China's past and present involvement in the Arctic region. So please join us for those programs, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. And take care, everyone, and we will see you next time. And thank you so much, Peter. And I hope people will visit your website, www.ralstongallery.com, where you have, I think, some more images up there on that website.
I owe you for that. Thank you.
Yes.
And it's so nice to see so many people, to see a bunch of people kind of like live without masks, to see faces.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.